Good afternoon, good morning for the colleagues that are on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you very much for joining this GBV webinar. Thank you very much to all the participants, partners from different countries, panelists from different countries and organizations, and of course, colleagues from VOICE and HIAS for organizing this very interesting seminar. I want to emphasize that the partnership between VOICE and HIAS started in 2022, just when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started in February. And in March, April, VOICE carried out a very useful and important report, which was called Waiting for the Sky to Close, talking with women and girls and also local and national organizations from Poland, Romania, Moldova, Hungary, and Ukraine. And in this report, VOICE was already pointing out the big issues and challenges that women and girls from Ukraine they were facing in Ukraine and also in these four European countries, Poland, Moldova, Romania, and Hungary. Then VOICE, with HIAS support, started to work with local NGOs, especially women-led organizations, by supporting women and girls from Ukraine, but also host communities. And it was not only about funding, but it was also about providing technical expertise. And at that moment of the emergency was very important. Thank you very much, VOICE and colleagues, for doing this work. Also, during 2023, VOICE, in partnership with HIAS, has been carrying out GBV assessments in the four countries, Poland, Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine, that they have been very important to realize the advancements that we have done since 2022, the challenges, and looking forward to how we can improve the situation of women and girls for them to be more safe, have more opportunities, and have a future in front of them. I want to mention also the important work that VOICE and HIAS have done together in Ukraine, working with more than 20 women-led organizations, providing not only funding, but also technical expertise and supporting women and girls all over Ukraine, close to the front line. And all this methodology was done through a participatory methodology where all the NGOs, the women-led organizations, were a part of this process when identifying with which NGOs and with people we would be working. So again, thank you very much for your presence here today. I think today it can be a way to compile all the lessons learned from these difficult 2 years and looking for the future of women and girls all over Europe that they are from Ukraine and suffering this situation. And also, of course, working with the host communities that women and girls are part of those. Thank you very much. And I'm hand over to our colleague Mandy Marsh from VOICE. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Enrique. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Enrique has said, it is an honor to get to host or facilitate the first panel that we have this afternoon. What we're going to do, just to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of how we're going to run this panel, we have 4 speakers who I'll introduce in a second. We're going to have about 20 minutes for an interactive discussion. We're going to we're going to have sort of a Zoom fireside chat here together. So we're just going to have a free-flowing conversation centered around some key questions. So we'll do that for about 20 minutes. And while we're having that discussion, please feel free to write into the Q&A option on the Zoom so we can collect your questions, because then we'll have about 10 minutes for a Q&A. And so we'll bring those questions together during that time and go through as many as we possibly can. And then after we finish our panel, we'll hand it over back to HIAS to take us through a second a second panel, and then we'll wrap up all together. So I want to introduce these great colleagues that it's such an honor to get to speak with. So our first colleague here is Aliona Onofre. She's the gender-based violence specialist for HIAS Moldova. Then we have Samantha Ponte, who's the gender-based violence coordinator for HIAS Ukraine. Then we have Ella Krakian, who's our feminist mobilizer specialist for VOICE in Romania. And then we have Ania Kromek, who's our gender-based violence specialist in Poland. So our first question that we're going to focus in on is, and Enrique alluded to all of the assessments that we have done throughout the emergency. So we're going to dig into that one a little bit, into the assessments a little bit more right off the bat. So based on the findings from the assessment reports and your personal experience with local women-led organizations responding to this crisis, what are the main challenges faced in preventing and responding to gender-based violence in the scope of this response? And so I'm going to ask Ella to jump in first, if you don't mind.
I would love to, actually. Very briefly, I would say the main challenges are pretty much systemic. So in this case, I want to refer both to the lack of sustainable funding as well as to a lack of strategic integrated responses that put GBV at the core of programming. So be it access to safe housing, to ensuring steady income, safe jobs, lack of overall economic support, the fact that there is no translation available in the context of most interactions with the authorities, be it medical staff, the police institutions. This together adds to an incredible amount of pressure. We have feminist organizations working at a grassroots level and are pretty much left alone many times in this fight. They receive limited funding or are at most pretty much, we could even say, instrumentalized by various bigger entities who maybe do not practice sustainable participative forms of capacity building, but who are maybe rather interested in appropriating progressive fights whenever it's convenient. So all of these groups have to struggle with this widespread structural instability that just deeply impacts their capacity to build ample and effective social movements that can transform social inequalities.
Great. Thanks, Ella. Samantha, why don't I hand it over to you next to build on what Ella has already shared with us.
Yes, thank you, Mandy, for the question. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. So maybe just to leverage a little bit what Ella was saying, I agree with her for most of the points that she already stressed out. And according to my experience working with the women-led organizations, I really think that this lack of financing is really putting a lot of pressure on the women-led organizations, and they really need support in developing their capacities. I would say not only in technical sectors like gender-based violence maybe, but also like grants designing and management and meal and reporting, just to strengthen their possibility to get to reach these eligible criteria in the humanitarian aid delivery. And also, there is a constant need to support the burden of their staff, especially in Ukraine. We see the women-led organization working at the frontline areas. And concerning the main challenges faced in preventing and responding to GBV, I would say that we really need to mention that gender-based violence services and information in hard-to-reach areas are really not often available for the women and girls. And donors are still focusing on immediate needs provision and not really in empowerment programs that are really there to address the root causes of gender-based violence. So I really think we should support women-led organizations in developing their leadership in delivering humanitarian aid. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samantha. I mean, it's so interesting and unfortunate that still at this point in the crisis, I think we still have to make the case for donors and other actors to actually understand that addressing gender-based violence is life-saving, like other basic, meeting the other basic needs. So Aliona, why don't I hand it over to you next?
Yeah, thank you. Dear Mandy, honored audience, I'd like to present the challenges that the local women-led organization from Moldova also face. It's pretty similar that our colleagues said before. It's limited funding and resources that affect the capacity of women-led organization to provide the services. Obstacle in obtaining funds, especially for the small women-led organization, difficulty in meeting eligibility criteria, so short deadlines in application, lack of information about the funding opportunities, limited flexibility of the grants, also understaffing, intensive workload, emotional toll that lead to burnout and psychosocial distress. Language sensitive barriers, especially regarding the use of Russian language, the communication with refugees, and last but not the least, its sustainability concerns. Organization focus on solving an immediate problem, mainly following the donor request instead of planning for ongoing systemic intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Aliana. I want to emphasize that point just because I know we do have donors here and most likely very like-minded donors with us, but it's an important point for us to understand that we need to be led by local populations and the actors who are really on the ground, who know best what is needed versus being having to do what we have to do things for funding, right? And what donors ask us to do versus what may not meet the most immediate needs for the populations that we're aiming to serve. So Anya, why don't I hand it over to you to give us your perspective on Poland? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mandy. So the characteristics of the response in Poland is that it was mainly led by women rights organizations and women-led organizations. And we could respond really quickly because we had the structures very often developed during the women's protests in Poland. And the withdrawal of humanitarian aid and lack of sustainable long-term support for women-led organizations now, and those organizations are still the ones who are on the front line of the response in Poland, mainly due to, of course, the structure of the response. We mainly help women, very often women with small children. And the lack of this sustainable support may force some refugees, mostly women with coming from vulnerable groups, to have to return to Ukraine before it is safe to do so. And this is what recent research shows, and this is really worrying. And the problem is that those women will be exposed themselves and the children, not only to war violence, but also they will have to very often reunite with abusive partners that they managed to leave. And another thing is that in Poland, WROs, women rights organizations, are the organizations who have the expertise on gender-based violence. And those organizations have been working for the last 8 years in extremely hostile social and political environment. They had to adapt the programs really quickly to respond to the influx of Ukrainian refugees, and they did. At the same time, struggling with police controls, withdrawal of structural funding, and even threats coming from the community. So this is the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. I think just to underscore that, I mean, so many of these great points that the colleagues have raised, but that one that I think we often don't hear about, and is such a reality in this region, is the tremendous backlash that especially women human rights defenders, women-focused organizations face in the region. And so not only are they dealing with really limited resources, limited support, but they're also the ones that are often attacked and have to almost hide what they're doing to serve the population that they aim to serve. All right, so let's shift into our next question. How have HIAS and VOICE worked together to support and implement programs that address and prevent gender-based violence in Ukraine and neighboring countries? So Samantha, why don't I hand it over to you to start with the perspective from inside Ukraine?
Yes, thank you, Mandy. So the partnership with HIAS and VOICE, I can say that we did several things. And first of all, we provided GBV prevention and response services for women, girls, including LGBTQI+ communities and group at risk, especially in the west of the country, in Lviv, Chernivtsi, and Vinnytsia, that are like a very hotspot and hubs for IDP population. We were able to provide integrated MHPSAT and GBV case management, referrals, and training to local authorities and public service providers. And the partnership with VOICE was very important because it made it possible to deliver all these services in a high quality manner, as we really invested a lot of time in training the staff and make sure that we were delivering according to the international standards and guidelines. We established more than 300 women and girls clubs in those areas, and we supported women and girls in psychosocial activities and empowerment programs, which is something that I already raised before, that is very important, even if like a crisis, an emergency crisis like Ukraine. HIAS is currently running a program to empower women-led organization with VOICE still, and we are aiming at promoting gender transformative agenda of humanitarian delivery in Ukraine. Last year, we started supporting localization by moving resources to women local organization, and we established the Women and Girls Emergency Response Fund. As already we mentioned before, we were providing short-term support to the local GBV actors among these women-led organizations, and now we started a second round of funding that is more focusing on long-term support and partnership with organizations in the east and south of Ukraine. And we're going to develop the capacity of these women-led organizations together with them, and we want to create a grassroots network and building a community of practice with them. Maybe last thing, we are also working on knowledge production and raising awareness. So HIAS and VOICE increase the visibility of our partners by conducting projects with 3 Ukrainian national media. And we are building our advocacy campaign to give women-led organization visibility and the opportunity to be heard by a large audience, at least we hope. Thank you.
Super. Excuse me. Thank you. Anya, why don't I come back over to you for the Poland perspective?
Okay, so we focused mostly on like 2 kinds of activities. First of all, we served as this kind of hub or intermediary between small grassroots local NGOs, very often responding to the local needs, and INGOs and UN agencies. And the other thing is that we focused mostly on capacity building of women-led organizations. So the point was basically that because many of those organizations were created as response to war in Ukraine, there were grassroots local community initiatives where on the front line of Ukraine response from day one, and they knew best how to tailor their programs to encourage their communities to offer real support and welcome and integrate the refugees, which we think is brilliant. We totally trust their expertise, but to best support them in transforming this response from emergency to more sustainable, we offered a complex program of feminist transformational leadership, which of course was preceded by service mapping and assessment. And the program has involved multiple gender-based violence and prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse trainings, mentoring sessions, educational materials, empowerment workshops, all sorts of training on burnout prevention, anti-discrimination, advocacy, mental health, psychosocial support, as well as coaching sessions. And maintaining those close relationships with partner organizations, we have also been serving as this kind of coalition hub, as I said, facilitating networking of local women-led organizations and exchange between those local organizations. So we formed this women and children working group that was meeting regularly every month. And we had 250 regulars coming to this group. So it was like sort of networking hub. So that's us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Aliona, one quick addition for what you focused on in Moldova.
Yeah, I just very briefly, I want to stress out that our efforts lead to providing capacity building for local authorities, social institutions, non-governmental organizations from different parts of the country to effectively prevent and address gender-based violence. Of course, the mapping support services developed by VOICE and HIAS team is an important tool and resource that updates the active services related to GBV. Also, we're providing support for the most vulnerable and marginalized group in the remote areas and the rural areas through free mobile STEAM. But I want to stress a lot of activities that should be done in the near future. We want to establish safe spaces for women refugees, especially in Roma community, conducting training session for gender equality and GBV prevention from the refugee Roma adolescent and their parents, organizing GBV awareness activities, leading community projects involving refugee in the prevention and intervention in GBV aspects. Also, I want to stress out our economical inclusion intervention. What we are doing, it's very important for the refugee. We offer trainings for refugee women in the host community and from the most vulnerable from the host community, vocational training, language training, specific tailored for the women refugee, integrating GBV and MHPSS as a cross-cutting priority. It's very short and briefly response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. So I'm going to shift this into our next question. So what are the most pressing needs of Ukrainian refugee women and other at-risk groups in your country with regards to their livelihoods? So Ella, why don't I zoom over to you in Romania first?
Just to make it super brief, I would say first of all that economic stability is an incredibly pressing need for refugee women, but also for Roma women, for poor women, for members of the LGBTQI plus community, as they are all severely restricted from accessing most means of livelihood, of safety as well, maybe in diverse ways, but they are incredibly impacted by this. And to this, and somehow connected to the issue, is also the lack of access to healthcare, to reproductive health, which has been an ongoing issue in Romania that has definitely impacted the most vulnerable, and to overall basic social services, lack of childcare support services, which deeply impact single mothers, which many of Ukrainian refugee women are, and they cannot access physical safety. Sometimes because of this, they are put in dangerous situations. They cannot maybe access jobs. And to this, I can also add lack of access to translation, which again puts a strain on how they can access any kind of services. In fact, and overall just access to education, safe housing, which has been a severe issue, safe homes, and obviously access to GBV services, and to psychosocial support, to mental health resources. And I would also add the experience of LGBTQIA plus people who have experienced severe issues of violence, particularly in the case of the LGBTQI plus refugees who have tried to enter the country and have faced intense violence during their entry, during their stay here. Many have left the country because of because of this. So there's all of these added layers of intersectional discrimination that also worsen their experience and their GBV risks.
Thank you, Ella. Samantha, why don't I hand it over to you to hear about the differences in relation to this question for inside Ukraine?
Yes, thank you, Mandy. So I think my answer will be very similar, as we already highlight some of the most important challenges. But what I probably wanted to stress out is that the conflict has had a very huge impact in terms of livelihoods, and sometimes we really don't identify the livelihoods area as a real need. As I said before, we are still trying to shift from the basic needs response to the livelihoods. And recently, HIAS Ukraine had we had some consultations with our women-led organization partners, and they really identified that as a huge need. Some women, they cannot find job, and not only among the IDPs, that of course they are struggling and they are like moving to different regions of Ukraine, but also women that they are like still close to the frontline areas. And I know there is the security bit, of course, that is the challenging, but still the livelihoods should be, the economic inclusion should be supported, let's say. And it's very interesting to see that women-led organizations are already starting to organize self-employment and life skills training together with small grants distribution to start business activities. And maybe just to stress that I think it's very important, and we should mention the situation of the Roma communities in Ukraine, which is something that for most of them, basically we can highlight that there are few opportunities available, and the ones that they are available are likely to be low paying because of the widespread lack of education and professional training among these vulnerable communities. So yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Samantha. So let's go to our last question. How should economic inclusion programming be developed to support Ukrainian women and meet them where they are at this stage in the war? What is needed versus what is less urgent? So let me hand over to Aliona first.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think Ukrainian refugee needs systemic program to ensure the economic and social integration. Until now, most organizations have offered very sporadic support to refugees, which has not ensured the sustainability and of the intervention, and the many beneficiaries remain very vulnerable. Through our intervention of HIAS Moldova, we understood that the only intervention focused on skills which are used by refugees or vocational training are not enough, and a more complex approach is needed, which also provides monitoring, career guidance, supporting to starting business that we plan to do in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anya, let's zoom over to Poland next.
Okay, so the needs are more or less the same as the one mentioned by Eliona, so sort of like systemic economic inclusion. But I also want to stress something that's maybe less obvious that we see here, is that we really need to support grassroots local community initiatives, especially those women-led, because they manage to organically include Ukrainian women into their leadership structures. And because we know our partners really well and we collaborate really closely, we know that this is really the case. So we have actually witnessed this quiet revolution of grassroots Polish-Ukrainian women's movement in Poland, which is amazing. And I think personally, we can't afford to waste this momentum now. It's a huge potential. And that's why I think it's urgent. So funds are needed to sustain those community-run projects. And the problem is that many of them may actually stop working next year because they have no sustainable funding. And many of those Ukrainian women openly talk about the experience of refuge as paradoxically this kind of transformative experience for the agency, often a chance to live abusive relationships, but also empowerment and discovering the power of kind of like transnational sisterhood and community. And they want to become community leaders. when back in Ukraine in the future. And we really need to support to facilitate this process. And that's what we need funds for. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anya. Thank you, panelists. So we've gone through the main part of our portion of the panel. I want to jump into a few really great questions that have come in. One that's really linked to what you were saying, Anya. So do you think that women-led organizations and women activists have had access to humanitarian decision-making spaces? And if not, what are the barriers, right? I think for the case of Poland, we've been able to work with HIAS to really bolster that movement of activists, right? And to help guide them into those rooms where decision-making is happening. But I think that's not an easy thing to do. And it doesn't happen naturally, right? That's one of the many reasons why Voice exists, is to actually address that actual issue where women and girls and the organizations that they lead are not brought into these platforms where key critical life-saving decisions are made. So real quickly, let's do a round across the countries. Ella, why don't we zoom over to Romania for your perspective first?
I would say, call me a pessimist. I would say that access to decision-making spaces has been mainly very exceptional. So unfortunately, women-led organizations have been invested into this role of, I would even say, a very feminized role within this way of like looking at the patriarchy, for example, in which women should do the work of caring for others without having a say in how they do that. So I would say even the way things work actually reproduce a very patriarchal and sexist and very dangerous way of doing this very important work. So in general, no, I would say access has been severely restricted, even though these groups are very much interested in doing so, particularly in Romania, but access has been mostly offered to bigger entities who have much more power, who have maybe much more financial power. So unfortunately, I would say the scenery is kind of dominated by a lot of interests that have very little to do with the actual goals that we share in this in the work that we do.
Thank you, Ella. Aliona, anything you want to quickly highlight?
I just want to quickly say that our goal is refugee and their protection, and we must do all that we can do in this regard. Especially our collaborative approach will be appreciated, especially with the women-led organization.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, super. Thank you. So there's one other great question that's come in. I just want to go over before we wrap up our panel. Can you share one inspiring story of a refugee woman who has been empowered through economic inclusion and overcome the challenges of gender-based violence? Or how can we amplify such stories of inspiration to raise awareness of not only is this work important around economic inclusion, but I would also say that it's actually doable. It's something that we can actually do at the height of what is still a major crisis. So Samantha, do you want to come in first? And then Anya, I'll hand over to you.
Yes, Mandy, thank you so much. Maybe for HIAS Ukraine, I would say that we didn't really start economic inclusion directly. So probably I will leave Anya to share her stories, which would be definitely better.
Okay,
so I think any inspiring story, Anya.
I've got an inspiring story. There was actually an inspiration behind my answer to the last question. So one of our closest partner organizations, which is a local community-based women-led organizations. They basically started working in the first days of the war by bringing refugees straight from the border. And one of the first women who was they brought to Kraków, to Poland, was this 50-year-old teacher. And she was immediately like included in the community, and she was kind of involved in creating this local community center that they started building in this local district, also finding spaces for other refugees, you know, in like people's houses. And it was just the first weeks of the response. And then like 2 months into the war, one day she came to the office and said to her Polish colleagues, you know what, and this is going to sound really paradoxical, said, you know what, the war was the best thing that ever happened to me. And people say like, wow, I mean, how come? And she said, because I finally left my abusive husband and I've got a job here. Because she had like a full-paid job by that time at the organization. And she was actually one of the community leaders who brought more community leaders from Ukraine into this community center. And this is where the story of, so now a year and a half into the war, they are really thinking about creating proper community structures in Ukraine. And based on this kind of idea of sisterhood that they learned and developed here. So yeah, so this is my story. If the person is listening to us, I totally admire you, and yeah, great inspiration, I hope, for many women out there as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Anya. Thank you, Samantha, Ella, and Aliona. It was a pleasure to hear from you and from the perspectives of all 4 countries. So we are going to take a 10-minute break for everyone for this webinar. So it is 7:40 a.m. my time, but we'll take 10 minutes right now. So please, you probably just leave your Zoom on, turn your sound off, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our webinar. My name is Dana Dolgin. I represent HIAS Romania here, and I will be the moderator of the next panel, a very interesting insight into the groundwork being done by GBV organizations. As we've discovered in the previous panel, and we discussed quite at length, women-led organizations from Moldova, Poland, Romania, and Ukraine were the first line of support for displaced women, and not only in terms of basic needs, now they're moving towards integration and support for integration. So now I'm really happy to have 4 representatives of 4 organizations doing exactly that. They ensure that women have access to dignified and sustainable work. That is not only a way of preventing GBV, but it's also a form of rehabilitation for survivors, as we've heard in the previous panel. And obviously are involved in providing solutions to GBV through economic empowerment. So today with us, we have in the order of, I think also of the conversation, Hanna Roshkova, head of the organization of Invisible in Ukraine, welcome. Elena Arhire, project manager from Anais in Romania, welcome. Nina Mocior, program manager for Dobry Start in Poland, also welcome. And Renata Grădinaru, executive director of FINA in Moldova. Really happy to see everyone and have this brief conversation really on economic empowerment, economic inclusion, and GBV. And I will start already with addressing the question to Hanna about the context in Ukraine. Obviously, I think if you could provide a short overview of what Invisible is doing in Ukraine for the audience, that would be very important. And maybe afterwards, if you can tell us a bit about the importance of economic inclusion programs in supporting women and girls and preventing GBV in Ukraine itself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm a head of NGO Invisible. We're a women-led organization. We named so because a lot of gender and women problems are taboo and invisible in Ukraine society. Our NGO was founded 2 years ago, and we begin our work in the territory of Kyiv region, where we opened the first women hub in Irpin. And this hub was opened as a co-working for a kindergarten, co-working with a kindergarten for children. The concept was that while women working or getting new profession, babysitter playing with their children. And also at the beginning of the war, we providing humanitarian support to the most vulnerable group, Roma women and internally displaced women. Moreover, for my organization, a top priority is addressing gender-based violence and domestic violence. And to achieve this, we are working in several directions. For example, this year, with the support of HIAS, we conducted a series courses for the physical safety for women. We want Ukrainian society to become more safety for women, but many solutions are still to be implemented at the state level and at the local level. That's why we can now what we can now do is to teach women how physically to protect themselves, so they can don't fear working home through unlit street in the evening. And the second direction of our work was collaboration with police to disseminate information about gender-based violence, about domestic violence, type of domestic violence, accountability for this, and to whom women can connect directly on the local level to protect them from the aggressive. And today, more attention needs to be paid working with the women in a small town and villages, so that they can better informed about their rights. And it is also necessary to work with the children, as they are become often victims of the domestic violence, and they need to know more about how effective they can protect themselves at the state level. But one of the most important part of our work, it is providing social economic support to women. And often women in abusive relationship needs the opportunity to become more economic independent. Therefore, we have been teaching women for the particular vulnerable population groups new professions and providing them new opportunities to retrain, to educate, on different professions, and how to open their own business, or they now can work as a hired worker. Particularly in our courses, we provide women starting kits, and using these kits, they can open their own own business. And I think it is very important to provide women with it was very important to provide women with a humanitarian support at the beginning of the full-scale invasion and on the first stage of war. But what is crucially important now is to provide women new opportunities, to involve them in the country's economic recovery, and to educate them in new profession. What is really neat is not to lose women during the militarization of the country. We must involve women in different profession sphere, from IT to high state management. Because gender representation in the civil service remains unbalanced. For example, by the end of the 2022, senior government management will compare 70% of men and 30% of women, and middle management compares 33% of men and 67% of women, and at the executive level, only 22% of men and 78% of women. And it is impossible, I think, to combat gender-based violence and domestic violence without economic independence of women, without women empowerment and gender equality. So I would take this opportunity to encourage donor as well as international organizations to strengthen program aiming at the increased economic inclusion for women. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you very much. And also pointing out two very crucial issues in what you've mentioned. I think first is this switch that we've been talking about quite a bit, from humanitarian funding to integration funding, and how necessary it is to actually provide long-term solutions. And the other, and I think this is very important for those listening in, is to understand the specificity of the Ukrainian context and how actually mobilization around the war and mobilization around the military can can actually aggravate the issues of gender inequality. And in a way, providing employment and providing opportunities for independence is a way of addressing that. Thank you very much. I'll just move on now quickly to Elena Arhire from ANAIS in Romania. Just following up on this perspective, I was wondering, how do women in the refugee community in Romania see economic empowerment? How do they relate to it, and also specifically in the activities of ANAIS? And maybe if you could talk a bit about your priorities and the priorities of your organization in the livelihood sector in the next year for women.
Thank you very much, Dana, for the questions. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to share from our experiences. I am indeed a project manager working for ANAIS organization. It is an NGO that is based in Bucharest, Romania. And before answering to your questions, I wanted to stress a bit the story of ANAIS, and I will then continue with another story in order to answer to the first of your questions. Actually, ANAIS started its activity in 2012 when at a legal level in Romania, the protection order was implemented by law. Which meant that victims of domestic violence had the opportunity to be protected by this legal instrument and tool institutionalized by the state. And at that moment, my colleagues, a group of lawyers and therapists from Bucharest, decided to create a nice association as an NGO fighting for women's rights, but also and mainly protecting and providing an integrated service, social service to victims of domestic violence, which was and still is a quite taboo, let's say, even today, subject in the Romanian society. And at that moment, more than, 12 years ago, my colleagues started this story of a nice association in order to create a safe space for victims of domestic violence by providing legal assistance and also psychological assistance to survivors of victims of domestic violence. And now we are actually talking about more than 12,500 women who addressed their issues with ANAIS. Not only Romanian women, but also women from the different refugee communities in Romania. This is the story of ANAIS, and I will continue with my other story in order to answer to how the Ukrainian community, women from Ukrainian community, see economical empowerment. We are actually, since the full scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, we started working with women and girls from the Ukrainian community living in Bucharest. We had different projects through which our main purpose was, on one side, to be able to provide them the services ANAIS is providing through legal assistance or psychological assistance. But also one of our main purposes was for them to be able to understand or to assist them in understanding the intricacies of this new system that was Romania at several levels, from a legal point of view to how different other systems, the healthcare or education system, worked in Romania. And this year we opened with the help of HIAS Romania, the community center for refugee women and girls, where we had the chance to talk and address more this issue of employment, economical empowerment. And in order to answer to your first question about how women see economical empowerment, a lot of the Ukrainian women we talked and had activities with saw it as a transformative experience, because some of them maybe never worked in Ukraine until the moment they got here. And we are talking about, at the moment in Romania, around 80% of the Ukrainian refugees are women and children. And one of the Ukrainian ladies, and her story I would like to mention, said at a certain moment that, before the war in Ukraine, I never had to work, because my partner provided with everything for us, for the family. While at the moment I got to Romania, I had to find a mean to support me and my child. And it was the moment when I got the chance to understand how powerful I was. And this is one of the stories that actually explain a bit how the Ukrainian community at the moment sees economical empowerment as a way of, transformative experience, discovering more of their capacities, of their ways of navigating a new type of life, sometimes totally different from what they had experienced in Ukraine. And for the second question, I would like to stress that one of the main layers of the community center we at the moment operate in Bucharest, dedicated to the Ukrainian women and girls, but also to other women and girls from different refugee communities living in Bucharest, is that we will actually, for the next year, in terms of priorities, one of our main focuses will be to continue the economical empowerment and the activities we organize within the center to encourage this economical empowerment of the women who actually have, along the time, created a community around the community center of HIAS and VOICE, by mainly trying to actually encourage them and assist them with not only understanding their rights, women's rights in Romania, but also their rights on the labor market, considering the fact that we are now talking about an integration phase, and the economical empowerment is actually one of the top priorities for the Ukrainian community also, and trying to, in terms again of priorities, to actually encourage them through different economical employment activities to integrate the labor market in an easier way sometimes, by also helping them to find new opportunities, sometimes maybe to get new opportunities in terms of education, for new professions or other professions than they had in Ukraine, and always trying to actually tailor as much as possible our activities in accordance with their priorities and needs.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you for pointing out something that also came up in the previous panel, how actually the displacement experience has also been transformative in many ways for many women that didn't necessarily have access to work or were in situations that actually put them in vulnerability. And I know Anais very much works closely with this community and this group of beneficiaries. I want to continue a bit this topic actually, and to move on to Renata from Moldova, from the organization AFINA, and ask her, does economic empowerment increase gender equality? What has been the experience of your organization and in the past year of responding to the Ukrainian crisis? And I think a bit more general, what are the challenges faced by local NGOs in Moldova in work in preventing GBV?
So hello, I am Renata Gredinaru and I am the executive director of the NGO AFINA. We are active more than 5 years, and we are empowering women. We are working with girls. We are promoting volunteering. AFINA is also an organization that is a member of the gender equality platform we have in Moldova, that has more than 45 members, different NGOs and experts that are promoting gender equality in different domains. And we have some experience, I can say, from September 2022. I can say we were asked by a group of Ukrainian women to help them launch in our municipality in Belts. We are in the north of Moldova, a safe space for them where to gather and to spend time, because last year in that period we didn't have some spaces in our municipality. We were a group of 5 women, 3 from Ukraine and 2 from Moldova, and we launched such a space because women needed and need time for themselves. They came in our country with 2, 3 children or more, and they needed to have the opportunity to be involved in different activities. So we launched a community center, a community house, we call it community house, and they had the opportunity to participate at different seminars, activities. At the same time, their children were guided by our specialists, and they were doing different handmaids, playing games, socialize, and women were sure that their children are near them, but at the same time they have the opportunity to talk together, to share ideas. And I can say that we were last year the first NGO in our town that employed officially Ukrainian women in our projects, because then it was very challenging to employ them, because we didn't have legal ways then, and little by little, we learned how to do it together with our agencies, local agencies and national agencies. Now we see that without financial independence, it is very difficult to speak about autonomy and decision-making power. A lot of women participated at different trainings in our region. Very many Ukrainian women were involved in different activities. Then they had the opportunity to apply for small projects after participating in those trainings, workshops, educational programs. We have women that could launch small businesses with the help of grants. And they invited other Ukrainian women to work with them together. And this participation and social empowerment give women the opportunity to increase their control over their lives and choices. Now we plan to go further, and with the help of HIAS, we want to create a hub for women that participated at different vocational trainings in the beauty sphere, and to give them assistance, mentorship, and help to get more skills and to be ready to earn money on their own after this help, and provide different services in the beauty industry. If we are talking about challenges that NGOs are facing, the first one, of course, is limited funding, because NGOs without funding can hamper their activity to run very effectively different programs. They cannot conduct constant awareness campaigns. They cannot sustain their operations. Sometimes NGOs do not have access to marginalized communities because of the lack of even transportation, geographical barriers, or maybe they do not have access to different communication channels. Another one can be stigma, fear of reporting. That's why NGOs need to create safe spaces and support systems to encourage survivors to come forward. Even if we are working together, another challenge is the sustainability and collaboration. Every NGO is very busy, and not only NGOs, but local authorities, other agencies, and these differing, they have different agendas. The lack of coordination everywhere. Yes, it is difficult to make collaborations, to make collaborations with local NGOs, with the local community leaders, government agencies, and this is very crucial for a long-term impact.
Thank you very much, Renata. Just want to point out two very important things I think that came across from your intervention. The first would be the safe space direction that is obviously has been very instrumental in the refugee response in all the countries around, and it's one of the GBV directions that HIAS also encourages, that can specifically fill in a gap that comes from the fact that either the either there is a lack of collaboration with the local environment, there is a lack of financing. So this sort of community approach, if we want, or sort of community alternative to GBV is becoming more and more instrumental in actually responding to these needs that are chronicle, really, and they cannot really be addressed by local authorities, for instance, or by local organizations only working in the country. Just want to send a reminder to everyone to everyone listening. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A chat, and we will come back to them in about 10 minutes. Because now I just want to move to Nina from Dobry Start in Poland. And I want to ask her a bit also as a continuation of Renata's intervention. What would be the challenges facing women refugees in terms of GBV in the labor market in Poland, from your experience? And also, how do you cooperate with local authorities to address GBV cases in Poland?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Nina. I work at Dobry Start. And as the foundation, we have more than 15 years of experience with working with migrants. So even when we are looking at our mandate, generally we started working with migrants. That was, of course, profile of migration is changing over these years in Poland, obviously. So of course, you know, the last 2 years have been very busy generally in our work. I think that it's also very important that generally we were focusing on those access constraints and access challenges of different groups of migrants to services. And I think that I will start with this, you know, with access generally, just to summarize some points we raised, because of course, context of vulnerability of refugee women, especially because looking at demographic profile, this is, yeah, as other panelists mentioned, 80% are women with children. So, and many children, normally that would be numerous families with single moms. So this is very important because when we look at access, generally access is already a challenge to work because, you know, of lack of flexibility sometimes with childcare, inefficiency, or maybe not enough places or another systems, you know, for childcare. So generally access is one of the big challenges. And also working for an organization who is working with MHPSS, this is also very important. Are all these women in shape, you know, to start employment, to start transformative experience in their life? Because indeed, many of them, they would manage and they would face a lot of challenges, for example, coming from the fact that they were already in abusive relationships before leaving the country. They have experienced war experience. So this is the question, are they in shape? Are they in physical shape? Are they in psychosomatic shape to start, you know, efforts on labor market? Yeah, so this is generally addition to the context, yeah, that we and all my previous panelists, you know, they were providing. I want to focus to give a message on those vulnerabilities in the labor market. And again, that's particular for Poland, but I would say that in terms of GBV in the labor market, we would identify some most prevalent types of abuse, you know, and some of them, they are coming from, for example, in Poland, from different types of contracts, because not everyone can enjoy full employment contract, which is giving the full set of benefits and, you know, entitlements. For example, paid leave, extra leave for children, paid, you know, sickness, sick leave, yeah, which is paid in full. So this is very important things, even type of employment, because many of moms, especially, or people who would be providing for the whole family, sometimes extended family due to their situation, they would not be enjoying these rights. They would be working 16 hours a day, not seeing their children, and sometimes working very low rates, you know, hourly rates, without very extensive set of, you know, entitlements or even protection, you know, landscape that we would normally have from employment contracts. So this is one of the challenges that today, when we diversify types of contracts, naturally we would have, you know, a lot of things that we are not getting because, for example, of the cost of employment, because of the global economy generally. So, and this is one of the biggest challenges, that even when we look at systematic protection of moms and workers, that would be one of the challenges. Yeah, and we have this introduction of service contracts, which is less protective, yeah, as such. And also for future moms, yeah, because also this is a question of how to protect pregnant women, not only those having children, but also people close to retirement age or pregnant women. So I'm referring to employment law as such, just to see that exactly this is very changing, yeah, the context of protection, because this legal framework is also giving a lot, in case we are, employed properly. When we are also looking at employment, of course, that's very obvious that those vulnerable groups, they would normally be employed at lower status jobs, less flexible. Sometimes those would be choosing night shifts or working extreme amounts of hours per day. So at very lower rates, yeah. So I do not have statistics, but of course, those groups, they would have lower rates than other groups, or generally comparable, yeah, jobs in the same area of business. One important thing is also when we look at protection, and this is indirect, because I mentioned in case we are employed, yeah, using, for example, a contract of employment. But I want to also mention that many refugee women and many migrants, they would not be employed at all. So this is the first risks, that they are vulnerable already. So using illegal employment and black market jobs and this kind of gray zone, generally we would have very prevalent black market jobs, which is not giving you protection at all. This is clear. And gray zone, I'm calling it somehow, because many of these women, they would be working full-time rate of hours. I mean, in terms of number of hours, that would be full-time job. However, for social security and for entitlements, they would be registered at 30% of their work time. Yeah, so what it means, when they are sick, when it comes to allowances or some extra support, even with legal employment, they are taken 30%. Yeah. So, of course, this is less taxes, less cost of employment, but at the same time, when we are looking at long-term consequences of semi-illegal employment, this is also having an impact, for example, on entitlement, when they get pregnant, when children are sick, when they need to have some days off. So, in the end, it is having somehow monetary equivalent, comparable, yeah, to those fully employed with full rates versus those who are not fully employed. And this is a group of people who are working very flexibly, who are working not as full-time workers sometimes. They're working as very service, workers and staff. And this is very big difference. So I would say that this is systematic discrimination, because sometimes just with the setup of employment, there are rights entitlement coming. Yes, I want to emphasize this one, not going back yet to what we already were discussing in the panels, that generally this group is as such very vulnerable. Yeah, so that would be the main categories, because all of this legal protection goes to, for example, rates of disclosure, of having, first of all, awareness and feeling that I have the right to disclose abuse, to report something illegal, or that's the worst case situations when they work illegal and something happens, and maybe real forms of GBV happens. I mean, sexual abuse, some kind of exploitation, indeed, very, very serious exploitation. Also, sexual exploitation is happening. So this is one of the entitlements that is coming, and protection aspect that is coming with fully legal employment, which means I have the power and I feel that I have the right to go and to report to someone that something wrong is happening to me. So, this is, again, using extreme form of violence when we look at how vulnerable this group is. And most of cases that come to us, this is normally cases when someone was abusing me, they didn't pay me money, they were not treating me well. I have no option now to do anything about it, because when I go to report it, in the end I was working illegally. So, the system is created in a way that I'm kind of punished. Being a victim, I'm kind of punished because in the first place I was not working legally. And this is the cycle, the vicious cycle that sometimes is happening when we look at, employment rights and protection of workers. And again, we are going back again to this extremely vulnerable group, which is, refugee women. So I wanted to emphasize this point, because this is, I would say that we see it a lot in Poland, because also of the legal framework of different employment types, and also of the legal framework of temporary protection, which is somehow giving open access to labor market, however, not, for example, not requiring and not executing that people are indeed employed, in full, that because, this minimum salary is not the same as making sure that those are employed legally people, these people, they are employed legally. So I wanted to emphasize this as my contribution to this panel. And when we look at local organizations, and as Elena, Renata were mentioning as well, that we are organization working with GBV survivors indeed, sometimes dealing with very complex cases. And in here, we are also working with other nationalities. And this is very important because our cooperation with local authorities is focusing mainly on cooperation with social protection offices. And they are, in terms of our legal framework for prevention of domestic violence, they are the owners of the blue card procedure, which would be one of the, institutional outreach systematic approach towards domestic violence. And we are indeed this, cooperation means supporting translations, supporting information, checking that, wow, look, intervention of the, of the Polish institution would be good for your family, or sometimes let's see whether you could take advantage of those different solutions already developed in Polish system, or not. So this is very extremely important that we are indeed working with sometimes concrete cases of domestic violence, of child abuse and domestic violence. And we are also here supporting many more groups than only refugee women, meaning other nationalities, sometimes mixed couples with people of different cultural language backgrounds, because indeed we serve people from almost every country in the world, like more than 100 countries. Indeed, those are people in our databases. And this is extremely important to teach them, to show them that maybe to some extent Polish institutions, host country institutions, they would be helpful. And as such, you have access to them, you could, because you are living here, you are protected under our Polish law, that you could use those services by Polish institutions, because intervention when something bad is happening to you, and violence is a crime, so forms of violence are normally a crime, and it's very important to raise this awareness that they can use those things developed in the host country. They are, under jurisdiction of this country, they are protected against violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, and thank you for opening up this conversation, because I think the topic of challenges in GBV and economic inclusion of refugees, and especially women refugees, is a very complex one. And obviously, it's been only, we've started dealing with it more recently once we have these projects of economic integration, but there's a lot of work to be done. I just want to open it up a bit to the other panelists and to Samantha, if you have something to add here with a specific question. Obviously, we've in all these countries and in Ukraine itself, we have seen a situation of compounded crisis, right? Because there were issues of GBV in all the countries that we've been talking about before the Ukrainian crisis, Romania, Moldova, Poland. These were serious, these were systemic, and they link to a lot of issues, political, financial, so on and so forth. So I think I would have a question for you to reflect on. How did the war and the displacement that it triggered really affect the GBV environment in each of the countries where you work? And really, did it impact? Did it make it more challenging to work? Or did the humanitarian presence on the ground, the assistance, more financial support, did that open new avenues of possibilities? I don't know, Elena, do you want to start? Or maybe Renata, whoever feels more comfortable.
I could try to start. I would say actually this humanitarian crisis brought both of the perspective. It was indeed challenging for the grassroots organizations to be able to manage a situation sometimes with which for sure we weren't that much familiar, and to be able to find solutions and to answer in the best appropriate way. And it was also when talking about how the displacement affected this area of GBV cases. For sure, in Romania, we were talking about very vulnerable categories and cases and contexts. And for Anais organization, for example, we had the chance to be able to assist different GBV cases, and there were several barriers, such as, for example, the language barrier, which is an important to take into consideration when talking also about economical inclusion. And I would say that there was also one of the findings that we had was that discussing systemic challenges, we are also talking about different systemic perspectives and visions that cultures had. For example, some of our beneficiaries since the very beginning said, the institutions of the state, we don't trust them. And at the very beginning of our intervention, we tried to address this topic, tried to describe and get them to be more familiar with institutions in Romania, how they work, the fact that they can trust and address their issues, which wasn't for some of our beneficiaries a very safe area, let's say, of addressing and trying to solve their issues this way.
Thank you, Elena. Renata, we have just a bit of time. Do you have any reflections on the context on Moldova? What did you see? Did you see systemic changes together with the displacement crisis? Perhaps changes also in the way social services react, local authorities? What has been your experience?
For our organization, it was also challenging from the very beginning, but due to the support of our partners, different donors, we could increase our potential and assist women. And now I can say that after more than a year and a half, people know where to come for help, and we have at our local level a good collaboration with local authorities. We have good channels of communication. We collaborate among other NGOs, and because it is very important to support each other. And I can say that there is trust. We can create now safe and organize safe activities, because we involve for a very long already period of time local women in our activities. And if in Romania there is this language barrier, barrier, in our town we have not such a barrier, because almost some 70–80% are speaking Russian, and it is very easy for them. That's why many women from Ukraine prefer to stay near their country in Moldova, those who have no possibilities to go further. And it helped us to increase even our potential as an organization. And we could gather around us women that now became the part of our team, women from Ukraine, I mean. And we are implementing other projects for other women from Ukraine. And I can say that this part that women from Ukraine are a part of our team give more trust for other Ukrainian women to come and to be involved in our activities, because they come to the activities organized by their colleagues, or we can say other women from Ukraine. It is very important for them.
Thank you very much, Renata, for this reflection. And I want to thank the panel again for sharing their experiences and also their thoughts on economic empowerment and how actually it worked in the context of the war in Ukraine, and obviously the displacement crisis that it triggered. Having said that, I want to pass it on to Mandy now for the final remarks and to close us off. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. And thank you, Elena, Nina, and Renata. It's nice to see some of you again, too. So it's a hard wrap up to do, because we've talked about so many important things. And I think some of the key messages that have popped up for me are trust women and girls. They know best what they need. Trust local populations to understand how best to engage in things that are going to help the most at-risk populations, and that often is women and the organizations that they lead, right? Feminist organizations that have been and continue to work as the front lines of the crisis response in this particular crisis. We know that they have, from the very day one, held the response. They have continued to be the front lines. They often are still unseen and unheard. We've heard in panel one that there are tremendous barriers to what keep women's leaders, women's rights activists from being in the center of where essential decisions are being made, and how if we don't facilitate their access, then we may get the response wrong, right? We may end up being donor-led rather than being led by what are the true needs in relation to Ukrainian refugees and other at-risk groups that have who have remained in Ukraine or have actually crossed borders into the other countries that we've focused on today. These organizations like Anais, Afina, these are some of the expert organizations that we as VOICE and HIAS are honored to have gotten to partner with and to continue to work with. And they need to be resourced and supported, because they truly are the ones that are making the changes that are needed in their communities, both in Ukraine and in the border countries. We've talked about how livelihoods we all are worried about livelihoods, right? I mean, it's probably one of everyone's number one preoccupations in their lives. Where are you going to have money coming in from so that you can take care of your family, your children, other people in your in your world, right? We know that there's tremendous evidence that when we get money into the hands of women, they make very wise decisions. They make decisions that are going to not only help themselves and their families, but that are actually going to have greater good outcomes for their entire communities. So let's trust that evidence. Let's trust women and girls as the front lines of what they know as needed as most important. Gender-based violence, addressing that, mitigating it cannot be something that is an add-on. It is something that we know has been front and center in this crisis, as it is in many other conflicts around the world. It is something that we know that women and girls and other LGBTI communities face because of who they are and how they are marginalized in their communities. And so we need to get them the support that they need, and they need to be listened to because they know best how protection can be carried out for them based on their unique realities. And livelihoods is part of all of that, right? It has to be something that is seen as life-saving. It cannot just be access to food, water, education, right? We know that addressing gender-based violence is a life-saving issue, and it needs to be addressed as such. And we also know that not having livelihoods is something that makes and exacerbates realities related to gender-based violence, including sexual violence. So if everyone who has come to join us today, if you could kind of keep those core messages at the front of your mind as you are advocating for this particular crisis. We know that this Ukraine, unfortunately, is not at the center of everyone's minds as it was 2 years ago. But we also have heard from the panelists that the realities are, the needs are still there. And in many ways, they're only getting worse as time goes on. People are worried about not only their livelihoods, but where they're going to sleep. They may have to go back into Ukraine because they cannot stay in Poland or other places. So there's so many things that we can still work on together to make sure that policy decisions are made in a way that is going to support women and their families who are on the move or who have found a place of refuge in another country. So donors and others who are here with us today, keep these messages in mind, reach out to us. Both Voice and HIAS are happy to have continued conversations with any of you. We really want to continue the momentum that has been started in this particular crisis. We have seen how women have in many ways thrived and found new jobs, made new career paths, have made tremendous change in Ukraine as well as in the border countries. So let's figure out how we can continue to maintain that and keep the attention on what is still one of the largest crises in the world that we're faced with. So thank you everyone who has joined us as participants. Thank you everyone who's been a panelist. We really appreciate you and look forward to staying in touch as we all continue to work on this particular emergency. Thank you very much.